She stood at the back of the wedding hall, hands folded, eyes lowered, trying to blend into the sea of smiling faces that refused to see her. Guests brushed past her like she wasn't even there, some whispering, some staring, others pretending she didn't exist at all. She wasn't dressed like them, didn't look like them. And from the moment she walked in, it was clear she wasn't welcome. Yet, she stayed, silent, still, as if holding on to something bigger than their cold stares. Every second felt heavier, and the room seemed to tighten around her until the music stopped. The groom stepped forward, paused and looked straight at her, his expression shifting from joy to something deeper, something the crowd didn't understand. Then he said her name, and in that single moment, the entire wedding froze. Because no one expected the truth she carried, and no one was ready for what would happen next. She hadn't planned on being there. The wedding wasn't meant for her, not in the way the others thought. Still, she walked into the golden-lit hall with a quiet purpose, each step steady despite the weight she carried. Her name wasn't on the guest list. Her presence wasn't requested. But something inside her knew she had to witness this day, no matter how uncomfortable it became. Her name was Maya, a woman who had learned, long ago, how to move through rooms where eyes followed her like shadows and judgments whispered louder than music. She lived a life built on resilience. A life where invisibility wasn't just a feeling, it was a survival skill. And today, surrounded by the soft glow of candles, polished tables, and people in immaculate attire, she felt the familiar chill of being the outsider. Everyone else was wrapped in celebration, champagne glasses clinking, photographers capturing perfect moments, families hugging tightly as if love existed only within their circle. Maya watched quietly, standing in a corner where no one would dare approach. She wasn't part of their picture. She wasn't part of their joy. Not yet. But deep inside, she remembered the boy she once knew, the boy who was now the groom. The boy who had made a promise years ago, a promise spoken when neither of them understood the complexity of life, race, or the world that would eventually separate them. She had held on to that memory, unsure if he still remembered, unsure if he would even recognize her now. Across the hall, the groom moved from table to table, smiling politely, exchanging rehearsed greetings. His bride glowed with excitement, capturing attention effortlessly. But Maya wasn't looking at her. She was watching the groom, searching for a sign, a flicker of recognition, something that tied the past to the present. A quiet tension hovered inside her chest. She didn't come to disrupt anything. She didn't come for confrontation. She came because the truth had waited long enough. And as she stood in that crowded hall, unnoticed, unwanted, but unmoved, something inside her said that everything was about to change. She just didn't know how fast. Maya remained by the far wall, a still figure in a place overflowing with motion. The wedding had entered its rhythm, music rising and falling, guests laughing in polished clusters, the bride drifting gracefully through conversations as if the night belonged entirely to her. No one noticed the tension quietly pulsing around the one woman who wasn't part of the celebration, yet Maya observed everything. She noticed the subtle shift of glances whenever she passed by a group, the tightening of shoulders, the quiet judgment tucked behind polite smiles. It wasn't new to her. She had lived through these moments her whole life, slipping into spaces where she was tolerated, never embraced. And even now, surrounded by people celebrating love, she felt the cold distance of people who believed love was only meant for those who looked like them. But the crowd wasn't what unsettled her. It was the groom. Every few minutes, Maya saw him glance in her direction, fast, almost instinctive glances that he tried to mask with laughter or conversation. He moved with the careful precision of someone avoiding a truth he wasn't prepared to face. His smile, bright and charming for everyone else, never reached his eyes. There was a heaviness to him, a subtle tension beneath the surface, As if the past was tugging quietly at his sleeve, Maya felt it too. Memories she had tried to bury began surfacing in fragments, running barefoot across summer fields, whispered secrets beneath old maple trees, shared fears spoken in hushed tones by two children who didn't yet understand the world's cruelty. She remembered the day they had promised to never forget each other, no matter where life carried them. But life had a way of breaking promises when race and society drew invisible lines between souls. The air in the hall grew denser as the evening progressed. Guests began taking their seats for the speeches, laughter quieting as hosts tapped glasses for attention. Maya sat alone at an empty table near the back. A deliberate choice by someone who thought seating her alone would make her presence less uncomfortable for the important families. But Maya didn't mind the isolation. It allowed her to see everything clearly. When the groom stepped up to the microphone for his speech, the room brightened with anticipation. Cameras lifted, guests leaned forward, and the bride squeezed his hand with affection. But Maya saw something no one else noticed, a slight tremble in the groom's fingers. His gaze scanned the hall, passing over people he knew, people he loved. Until it reached her. In that moment, his breath faltered. He looked away quickly, forcing a smile as he began speaking about love, commitment, and gratitude. His voice was steady, well-rehearsed, almost perfect. But the more he talked, the more Maya felt a quiet storm building behind his words. He spoke about the journey that brought him to this moment. Yet each sentence carried an unspoken truth. A truth he had spent years trying to outrun. As he continued, Maya felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with the weight of everything she knew. She hadn't come to expose anyone. She hadn't come to cause a scene. She only came because she believed the truth deserved to be present. Even if silent, but something unexpected happened. The bride noticed it first, the brief hesitation. The flicker of uncertainty in her groom's expression. A whisper of discomfort spread across her features as she followed his gaze toward the back of the hall. Her smile weakened. Confusion clouded her eyes. She couldn't place Maya, but she recognized the significance of her presence by the tension in her husband's face. Guests, sensing the shift, began turning subtly to see where his eyes had landed. Some looked with curiosity, others with suspicion. Maya felt their stares tightening around her like invisible ropes. But she didn't move. Her stillness seemed to challenge the room. The groom continued speaking, but his words had lost their rhythm. He glanced at Maya again, this time longer, as if a part of him finally surrendered to the memory he had tried to bury. Maya saw something shift inside him, something heavy rising to the surface. Then the music paused. Not by accident. The band had stopped for the next segment of the ceremony, but the timing sliced through the room like a blade. Silence expanded slowly, swallowing the murmurs, the laughter, the forced elegance. And in that thick quiet, the groom exhaled a breath he had been holding for years. He stepped away from the microphone. The bride watched him with a mixture of confusion and dread. The guests leaned in, sensing the tremor of something unspoken, and Maya felt it the moment just before truth breaks open. She didn't know what he would say. She didn't know how the night would unravel. But she knew this silence was no ordinary pause. It was the breath before a life changes. The groom stood frozen in the silent hall, breathing as if the air around him had suddenly thickened. His polished shoes seemed heavy against the floor, his spine rigid with the weight of a truth he could no longer bury. For years he had carried it quietly, believing distance and time would dissolve what the world told him he should forget. But now, under the warm glow of chandeliers and the watching eyes of hundreds, that truth demanded to be seen. He turned slowly toward the back of the room, where Maya sat alone, still, steady, unshaken despite the pressure of every curious gaze falling on her. She didn't shift. She didn't lower her eyes. Instead, she held the same quiet strength she had carried her entire life, the kind that grows in people who have learned to withstand judgment without breaking. The bride's fingers slipped from his arm as she sensed something unraveling. She watched his face carefully, searching for an explanation in the tension drawing lines across his features. A soft panic rose inside her, not loud or dramatic, but tight and trembling like the feeling before a storm reaches the ground. Guests shifted in their seats, whispering behind their hands, trying to piece together the connection between the groom's trembling breath and the solitary woman at the back of the hall. A wave of discomfort spread through the room, rippling beneath the polished surface of celebration. It wasn't anger or chaos, just a deep, uneasy awareness that something long hidden was about to surface. The groom stepped forward, leaving the microphone behind as if words were suddenly too fragile to hold what he needed to release. Each step echoed softly, a slow rhythm cutting through the quiet. His shoulders trembled. His eyes glistened with the truth that had followed him through childhood, through adolescence. Through every moment he tried to reinvent himself. He reached the center of the hall, where every eye was forced to follow him, where the entire room seemed suspended between breath and silence. And then, without warning, without hesitation, he said her name. The sound wasn't loud, but it struck the hall like a fault line splitting open. Gasps rose, chairs shifted, hearts tightened. The bride's expression collapsed into confusion, then fear, then something deeper, something she couldn't yet name, because the name he spoke didn't belong to a stranger. It belonged to a past he never admitted. A past built on bonds, secrets, and a promise made long before this wedding ever existed. In that single moment, the atmosphere shattered. The room no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a revelation, one that would change everything the guests thought they knew about the groom, and everything the bride believed about her marriage. And Maya, she didn't move. She didn't flinch. She simply met his gaze, unblinking, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. The hall remained frozen for a heartbeat, the weight of truth hanging thick between the guests. Every polite smile, every polished gesture, every whispered judgment had evaporated in that single instant. Maya stood poised, her strength unmistakable. As the groom's gaze lingered on her, filled with recognition, apology, and a gratitude that words could never fully capture, he stepped closer, not to confront, not to explain, but simply to honor what had always been there, what had always mattered. The room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves recognized the importance of this moment. People shifted uneasily, unsure what they had witnessed, sensing that life as they knew it had briefly faltered. The bride, standing at his side, realized she was a spectator to something far bigger than her expectations. Her excitement, her celebration, even her control over the evening all seemed insignificant against the gravity of a truth long ignored. She took a step back, allowing the space for honesty, history, and dignity to take center stage. Maya's presence was no longer invisible. She hadn't barged in or demanded recognition. She hadn't raised her voice or called for attention. She simply existed with a quiet power that forced everyone in the room to reckon with what they had overlooked. And in that reckoning, the crowd began to shift. The tension didn't vanish instantly, it lingered, but something had changed. Perceptions had cracked. Assumptions had faltered. And for a fleeting, transformative moment, the story of exclusion had been challenged, reshaped by a simple act of acknowledgement. The groom extended a hand, not in apology alone, but in connection, in remembrance of promises kept and respect long overdue. Maya accepted, and in that handshake lay years of unspoken truths, resilience, and the silent declaration that dignity could not be erased by ignorance or prejudice. As the ceremony continued, the air felt different. Guests moved with a cautious awareness, whispering about the courage they had just witnessed, the quiet revolution that had occurred within the walls of a wedding hall. And though life outside would continue with its biases, its judgments, and its selective blindness, this moment became a beacon, a reminder that recognition and respect are more powerful than avoidance and silence. Maya left the hall that night unchanged on the surface. But the room had shifted beneath her presence. And the question remained, lingering long after the music resumed, how many more truths go unspoken, waiting for a moment that will finally make everyone see? Because sometimes the smallest acknowledgement can ignite the largest change.